I thank God for this opportunity. I thank God for for the invitation. I am eager to share what God has given me.
Lula Bailton has excelled in multiple areas in her life as an educator, an ordained minister, an attorney, a director, and author of Extraordinary Ministry in Ordinary Places. One significant trait holds true: her deep faith-filled desire to empower others to be successful. She is an innovator in Christian community development. Let us welcome Dr. Lula Bailey Ballton.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here. I wanted to go on. I had a debate about playing the introduction. I want to sincerely thank my media team, particularly Sonia Branch, who said, you need to walk in the power, you need to walk in Christ and not be afraid. And until I heard Dr. Hemmings, I would have assumed that posture, that is as much me as any other part of me. That is a Black girl born at a colored hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas, who said yes to the Lord. And so to that end, I'm delighted to be here. I'm eager to share what the Lord has given me. Thank you, Sonia, so much for that introduction. That's her voice, and the development of the PowerPoint is a team effort by Supreme Systems, and I'm grateful so much to them. First, I want to thank God for being here. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be well. I'm happy that I've had my vaccinations. Give God credit for everything, even my circuitous route to getting here. I certainly want to thank Pastor Nisla, I want to say it right, Nisley Guerra, my husband of 52 years, Carl, my family, my pastor, Bishop Blake of West Angeles, and everybody who's checked in. I am learning how to do this kind of presentation. I'm used to doing it live, but I thank God for this opportunity. I've written notes from Dr. Hemmings all over my notes, so it'll be really interesting. Hopefully, I will move forward. So today we're talking specifically about Christian community development. So I want to talk to you, why would we do this? What's different about this than I'm a Christian, I'll go work for the county. Every municipality has a community or economic development department. Sometimes it is the city or the county, the state, the federal government. And I'm a Christian, I could go work for the county and call it community development. However, there is a really big difference between being a Christian and going to work at a development corporation or doing one as ministry.
Hello, I'm Angela Bassett, and I'm a proud member of West Angeles Church. In 1994, Bishop Charles Blake and the West Angeles Church created a Community Development Corporation, the CDC, as a way to bring resources and people together to build a better community. The CDC is a comprehensive and compassionate outreach organization to people in need. Today, this nonprofit group has an active, committed staff working and touching the lives of thousands through its holistic approach. Dozens of national awards are proof of the CDC's tremendous success in strengthening individuals, families, and the community. There's no doubt that West Angeles Community Development Corporation is an independent agent of change.
So I used Angela Bassett and her commitment to our work as an attention getter to see what we do and how we do it. In Ezekiel, the 22nd chapter talks about, excuse me, what's going on at that time. The politicians or the royalty are using the money, taxing the people, shedding blood, destroying neighborhoods, and preachers are saying, "Thus saith the Lord," when I haven't spoken, and my people are oppressing and mistreating aliens. That caught my attention all those years ago when I went to Pastor Blake and said, I think God is calling me to do this, but I'm not sure that I can leave my practice. I'm not sure that I can afford to do this kind of work. And he said, if the Lord is leading you, just like Dr. Hemmings was saying, he'll take care of you. And at that point, I became a part of the West Angeles ministry, and I started the CDC. And I started it because of that Ezekiel 22 experience. Why would you do this work? The Lord says he would destroy the city. He would destroy where there are gatherings of people because of those things. The government being corrupt, the preachers not telling the truth, saying he said something he didn't say. And those of us who belong to him are not treating the poor right, not treating aliens right, according to the King James. And well, who will stand in the gap? He said all he needed was one. We look around and we see our communities. In your community, are the aliens being oppressed? Are the poor being cared for? Has the government or royalty or the leadership taken their work, their need to the places, to the upbuilding of the people? I've been very concerned. And when I started, I wanted to figure out how we could move forward. So what I wanted to say, why we are doing this work, we are the gap, we are standing in the gap. I consider us Christ Calvary. We're the ones that stand in the gap on behalf of the Lord to make sure those things that we saw in Ezekiel 22 don't continue. And our goal is moving towards Zechariah 8. So before we go too far, let's talk about, we said why we're doing it. What is it that we're doing? We said we don't want to just get a job in a public entity and try to do community development. But it's important, if we're talking about doing it, what in the world is Christian community development? I've written a book called, excuse me, I've written a book called Extraordinary Ministry in Ordinary Places. And it has lots of detail about how you go about doing this. But this part is the why. So Christian community development is not just economic growth. You are in Southern California. Some of us, I'm in Atlanta, and I bring you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia. There are people in Chicago I know that are on and around the country. We all have some of the same issues. And when we bring them to those who have authority and resources, it appears we're just looking for some economic growth. But Christian community development is much more than that. It's not doing for people what they can do for themselves right now. We're not trying to make people dependent. We're not trying to diminish their humanity. And it's definitely not just modernization. In some places in this country and around the world, you think if the Christians come or if the money comes, everything will be perfectly equal and modern. But Christian community development is not just that. It's also, and I think this is real important for pastors and those of who are working inside a ministry already. It's not a vehicle designed to generate money, to build your church buildings. I have people that come to me often. Dr. Ballton, how you get a grant? Dr. Ballton, we need a new sanctuary. So if I could get some of that housing money, we could use the fellowship hall or the open space and we could have church there. I'm not saying those things don't happen, but we don't get money to build our church by taking money for things that were designed for other pieces. That's what this next point is about. Christian community development is not just another way to get money from the programs designed for the poor to enhance middle-class ministries. How often have you heard, well, if I could just get some of that stimulus money, or if I could just get some of that housing money or that job money. I'm not saying we don't get those money, but that's not what a Christian community development does as its center. Christian community development is something completely different. First, it's a process that allows people to reach for all God intends for them to as his children. Everything that he intends, we want to make a relationship so that we can help them see that and do that. It's a process of change. The word talks about the renewing of our mind, which causes people to lose their limitations. Have you had people come to your church or your ministries and tell you how poor they are? Tell you what it is they don't have, what they need, but not see themselves positively, not see themselves as they're growing. Christian community development is really a process in which people move from the place where they are object of other people's agendas or other people's charity to a new place where they set their own agenda under the lordship of Jesus Christ. That's a very different look at what Christian community development is, and we find most people don't look at it like that. And I think it's really important as believers, if we're going to move into this arena, that we understand that our goal is not building buildings. Our goal is not just getting some jobs. Our goal is not just a free giveaway of whether it's food or whether it's clothing, but it is in fact a process of change, which causes people to lose their limitations. Christian community development is ministry. It is without a doubt what it is you do, how you do it. And as we heard today already, you have a different perspective when you're doing it as women. Women are historically, socially, and in our communities, caretakers, but we've often not been the leader. And when you lead a Christian community development corporation, then you become a community leader, a place that galvanizes the view that people have of themselves as Christ sees them. And that's a huge transformation that we'll have to talk about at another time. So for a CDC, what is it the first thing that people want to do? They want to get a 501c3. When the Christian cavalry comes, those women who believe, we need to understand these pieces of how to get ready. And for illustration today, I'm going to use get ready, get set, go. There are two parts in doing a Christian Community Development Corporation. One is the development of it, how you start it, how you get it going. And the other is how to sustain it. I often speak about everybody starts school. Lots of people start CDCs, but they don't know how to sustain them. So today we're going to talk about how you get a good developmental start. So number one, You want a 501c3. Can we stay on that page back, please? 16. A 501c3, and how do you become one? And does your church need one? A 501c3 is one half of the CDC legal name. Number one, it is tax identification number, and that's federal. Once you receive a 501c3, people can give you money and take it off their taxes, which allows you to ask them, and very often they'll want to. They want to, there are a variety of tax benefits for people who pay taxes to designate your nonprofit or your CDC where they want their money to go. A question I get asked lots of times from pastors and ministers is, does your church need a separate 501c3? My answer is, it doesn't need one, but it's wise to have one. In every state, there are different corporate laws. More companies have their corporations incorporated in Delaware than any other state, because Delaware doesn't have high taxes for corporations. Look at where you are and decide. You have to be a corporation in a state, and a corporation under the law is a person that can own property, a person that can be sued, all of those things. So if you don't have a separate one, everything that's done in your nonprofit is treated like a department of your church. Even if you have the same board on both your CDC and your church, the law will look at it as if it's one company, which on one hand makes your bottom line look good very often, but the most dangerous part of it is you can be harmed by not separating. Let's say you build some beautiful housing and somebody gets pushed off of a balcony, or somebody falls and breaks a hip, if it's senior housing. There, surely a lawyer will show up and they can sue the church because there's no separation. And when you can sue the church, you can sue the pastor or the board of trustees or the board of directors, however you're organized. But it opens the church up to everything that happens in its nonprofit. So creating a legal wall between the two is important. It's extraordinarily important, particularly if you plan to purchase assets. Thank you. So in the development stage, we have looked at a 501c3, and we'll look at it again. I want you to think about where we started. I think we have an audience of leaders. It's important to have a vision and a mission statement. You saw my mission statement for West Angeles CDC at the beginning: to increase social and economic justice, demonstrate compassion, and alleviate poverty as a tangible expression of the kingdom of God. But that has using the vehicle of community development. The mission is how you get to the vision. And for those of you who are pastors, this is really important for you to hone in on, that a church needs one vision. If the pastor has a vision of how it should be, what's going to happen, the Lord gives us his vision in the Bible. This is what it's going to look like at the end. Zechariah says the old men will be able, the elderly, not just men, the elderly will be able to walk with their canes. They'll be able to sit in the street. Children will be free to play. This is his new city. That's what we're looking forward to. The pastor has a vision, and from that vision, our mission is how we get there. But if the pastor has a vision, and the deacons have another vision, and the choir has another vision, and the youth department has another vision, generally what we have is a mess. So make sure that everybody involved in creating and developing your CDC is on the same page with the pastor. This is what we want to see once we start this CDC. This is the direction we're going. I like to use an analogy of a map. If you are going to Chicago, you know your destination. That's your vision. We're going to Chicago. But your mission, how you get there, if you are in Los Angeles, there's a very different way than you'd go if you were in Atlanta. You'd go northwest from Atlanta. You go east if you were in Los Angeles. If you were in Little Rock, where I was born, you would go due north. So your mission has to say some specifics about where you are and who you are. What we just heard as the mission for West Angeles CDC was, in fact, the calling, who we are. It says we are called as West Angeles Community Development Corporation to promote justice and peace, to demonstrate compassion, alleviate poverty as tangible expressions through the kingdom of God, using the vehicle of community development. Simply put, livable wage jobs, decent affordable housing, and an atmosphere of peace. But this is a liberating process, and it's aimed at economic empowerment, social justice, and community transformation. Not just new buildings, not just a few jobs. That's what we're called to do. It's important for us to know who we are, kind of the vehicle that we use. The identity of our CDC was a CDC that operates within the greater ministry and vision of West Angeles Church of God in Christ. We support the linking between the church and the community. Our CDC represents an effort by believers in Jesus Christ to reach out and witness and ministry based on the conviction that the gospel of Jesus Christ is relevant to and able to significantly impact the community in which they live and serve. So it's a lot larger. Now we have a way to get there. This is who we are. That's where we're going. And then our purposes are the purpose of the CDC. We had 3 simple purposes and we developed programs to fit in those. One was economic empowerment, one was social justice, and one was community transformation. We don't have time today to go through those in any detail, nor is there particular interest, but I want you to understand this is all the stuff you do before you start walking. You want to have where you're going, you want to know how you get there, and you want to know who you are. So we develop a strategic plan, and that's for what's our strategy? We know what we want to do. We know who we are. We have some ideas about how to get there. So we need a plan. And a plan winds up being our programs. It is who we're going to engage. Then we develop a core organizational staff. One of the things that I think was so important in the success of our CDC is that we did not hire any on-the-job training people to be in charge of anything. All the staff that were in charge of a department or a project or a program were professionals, and God, who is greatly, gave me great mercy, sent me people who were learning how to do it at church, but they already knew how to do it. Administratively, there were people who were fabulous in administration. My housing director had been the housing director in Pasadena. My economic development director was a community student who had gone to Berkeley and MIT to learn her craft and worked other places. So developing that core staff, making sure they know what they're doing. As a young lawyer, well, I wasn't young, but as a lawyer, I found that when you don't know what you're doing, we tend to dump those people off on poor people. And I was determined not to do that. For example, if you, when you finish law school, if you don't have another job, they tell you can always go be a public defender. Well, I think that's one of the most important jobs you can have, but it's one that people wind up there who've never had any legal experience. They're right out of school, and they learn on the people who are poorest in our community and the least served. And once they get experience, they'll go work for a firm and make a lot of money. The same thing happens in teaching often. I'm a teacher, and I know by unions, your seniority, you can teach where you want to. New teachers, inexperienced teachers, or poor teachers wind up in the communities where the children need the most help. There's certainly exceptions to all of this, but what I'm saying about your CDC is make sure that you make an effort to flip that script, that you develop a core of organizational staff that know what they're doing, and then bring people on under them that can learn how to do what we already know how to do. So that's the next one, that recruit, train, and evaluate staff. We have the core who know what they're doing, and then we recruit, train, and evaluate staff. We set up systems to ensure that all of the departments, all the programs, there's an accountability to the organization, an accountability to the church, and accountability to the community where we are. When we talk about doing a strategic plan, one of the most important things for a Christian community development corporation to do that's different than a government-run one is a felt needs concept. And we call that what Jesus did. He generally didn't go places and say, hey, come here, you're blind, let me heal you. His posture was, what would you have me do? When they wanted to be healed. And every miracle, and as he moves through, he would respond to the needs of the people. And what we find when we don't do that first is a disengagement that makes our ministry ineffective. One of the most striking examples is Robert Taylor Homes in Chicago. For those of you who've been to Chicago, you know what I'm talking about. In the early 60s, late 50s, there was a move to create beautiful and public housing. And in Chicago, there was a great influx of people coming from the South, as there were most large cities in the North, because there was work. And to escape Jim Crow, we find that people came and the housing was poor. You know, there were tenement houses, a lot more people than there was space, poor sanitation, all the things that come with poverty in a big city. And so people who really cared about that community, who wanted to do something, decided they were going to improve that community. And so, you know, rule number one is find out what the people want. And when they did all the research around just south of the University of Chicago, 61st Street, they found that the people were asking, they wanted the grocery carts removed from the streets and the sidewalks. Well, Robert Kennedy and I can't think of his name right now, one of the great social workers and leaders at the University of Chicago, knew they had resources, they had money, and they knew they didn't want to just remove those carts off the street. So what they did after that, they invented a 501c3, and then they raised, RAZED, the neighborhoods that were around there, and decided to put poor people in beautiful high rises along the lake, beautiful views, but in the process, they destroyed neighborhoods. You know, the lady at the end of the block who kept all the kids after school till their mothers got off work, all of that, the social interaction was destroyed, and people were put in these high-rise buildings that didn't know each other. They lost the fabric of the community, and that became the most notorious and dangerous building series of buildings in the city of Chicago because the basis was wrong. They didn't respond to what the people wanted. And I found myself guilty of that before too. As much as I know it and teach it, I worked about a block away where young women used to come and sit in a parking lot with their babies. And they spend most of the day there. And so I had a friend that worked at the Bank of America who called me, look, we have some money, we have some daycare, and you can build a daycare, and you can do this, and preschool. Oh, I was so excited. So I went to I got plans drawn up and renderings done. And I went to the girls on in the parking lot, and look, I have this opportunity for you guys, and you'll be able to do blah, blah, blah. And I was so excited. And I got a response that I was shocked. Here I am in my head doing this great thing for these young women. And they said, I can't leave my kid. My mama keep my kid. I need a job. And I thought, there I was being who I said don't be. So we have to be careful and look at ourselves. At that point, I began to look at what can we do to put people in this community to work who don't have, let's say, a college education, or some of them not a high school education. What can I do to make a living? And grocery stores worked. And I went to the Albertson family, who had a store, a family store, and they were all over the country. Well, not all, they were in Florida, California, I think 5 states, but they were never inside cities. They stayed away from cities. The largest city they ever were in was Torrance, but they liked being in towns and between cities, but not in cities. So I suggested to them this would be a great mission work for them, and we talked about it. And they built the Albertsons that was on La Brea, and I believe it is Obama Boulevard now. But the idea, all of the people who went to work in there were from that community. They were trained from becoming butchers to becoming cashiers. And that was because I listened. Had I built the daycare, it would have been an empty daycare. And on a much smaller scale, many of us as believers have done things in communities and been disappointed by the response. We have a food giveaway, and at the end of the day, we have all this food, and we know people are hungry and they wouldn't come get it. Or we have a clothes distribution, and what you hear people say is, they don't want anything anyway. They're not trying, or they didn't blah, blah, blah. They didn't come to the meeting about the school. But we do it differently. If we do it as Jesus said, then what would you have me do first? And that allows you to develop a relationship that is different than maybe your church has. Historically, and in the community that I grew up in, the church was the center of that community. So decision-making for the public resources, getting jobs, being identified. The Sunday school teacher, that's our little lawyer, or that's gonna be our teacher, or that's whatever it was, you were ours. And the generation right after me didn't get that because we became so much more transient. We go across town to go to church. We weren't a part of that fabric of that community. And so we began to tell our kids to grow up, get an education, get a good job, and get out of this neighborhood. Get a good education, get a good job, get out of here. And so our kids flew the coop, and they found glass ceilings, brick walls, but we didn't tell them to come back and buy the grocery store. We didn't tell them to come back and buy the cleaners or the gas station, and got mad when other people bought into that American dream. They need to hire the kids in the neighborhood and not their own family. Not necessarily. That's the American dream. You create a business that your family can grow up in and educate. Your name can be on the back of the neighborhood baseball team. And so as a part of our development, making sure that you are a part of the fiber of this community. And one of the ways that worked for me was to make sure that everything we built was without a fence. West Angeles CDC doesn't have any fences around the housing except the housing for the handicapped, because the wheels of the wheelchairs would run down and make them go. It's across the street from Manual Arts High School. So there is a cement around it, but not to keep people out. Everything, and that has to be a part of what you want your community development corporation to be. Are we partnering with this community to create the community we know it can be? So we've gone over how to get ready. These are the things we did to get ready. Get your 501c3, decide what your mission is, what's the vision of the leadership. So after you're ready, then get set. That's what we went to. Then let's look at go. The next slide, please, 21. These are the questions you can ask yourself that we went through. Select. Let's stop right here on 22. When you select a board, it's important, your founding members tend to be the people who can help you get it off the ground. They tend to be fundraisers, church leaders, people who don't want to stay and be involved in the work of the CDC on an ongoing basis. They have something else that generally is more pressing in their involvement. But there are people that you may need in your denomination, you may need in your city or in your community that need to be publicly shown that they're on board with the work you do. The second dot talks about how you select continuing board members. And for those of you particularly that are pastors, I think it's extraordinarily important that you hear this piece. When you select board members, if you go to the internet or if you just get a regular textbook on it, it will tell you to get an accountant, a lawyer, a community person, and a church member. And all of those are really, 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 really good to have. But if you have one vision and you have your mission statement, the most important thing for you to do is get somebody who agrees with the vision and is able and interested in following up with the mission. The reason I say that is I have had pastors and leaders coming to me who, and pastors tend to think if they put all the money in it, they've set it up, they've hired the people, that is their CDC. Well, under the law, the CDC is a separate person. It's a separate corporation. And even if you are on the board, you can't be the chair of the church and the chair of that board too. You only have one vote. So it only takes two people. And it will change your whole operation. We've had experience with somebody in Chicago, a friend who had started a church school and made it a 501c3. He got Hodgkin's disease and got very, 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 very ill. And while he was in hospital, he had selected outstanding board members, people who wrote curriculum, people who had PhDs in education as well as EDDs, the cream of the crop in every area. He was a lawyer and a city councilman. And Carl called my best friend and I ended up talking to him because he said everything bad was happening at the school. And we're like, we can't imagine. He said, well, remember this, you can hire expertise. And this is the part, I told you the story so you'll remember this part. You can hire a great lawyer. You can hire competent accountants, but you can't hire loyalty. So make sure that the people that you select on the board are loyal to the ministry and vision of your CDC. If you're a pastor and they leave, all you need is one more person or a strong personality that will sway the group because they don't have ownership. You don't have ownership of that organization. One of the things that I did to make sure that people were very aware of what our vision was is everything we built, I put West Angeles' name on it. So it's West Angeles CDC. There's not another CDC that I know in Los Angeles or in California that CDC is the name of the church. You know, they're the Renaissance, they're World Outreach. There are all kinds of names, but they don't name the church. And that gives freedom. You know, it's a lot easier to change everything if you feel it's right. And I'm not saying they're necessarily wrong. I'm just saying you lose direction if you're not going in that same direction. So it loops back to making sure that you have people that are loyal to the vision and the mission that you created. Next slide, please. 20. Thank you. So you're ready? Now we're set. Next slide. If you don't plan, if you just get your CDC and here we go, let's just jump in here and see what kind of money the government has. That's what people usually used to tell me. Go see who's got money. Is it HUD? Is it Commerce? If you don't have a plan, then you will fail. The way we learned it growing up is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So a strategic plan is that map that I spoke about at the beginning that takes you from where you are to where you want to go. A strategic plan is not a day-to-day record of what you're doing, but what strategies are we using to get to where we want to go? Next slide, please. To be successful, you need to be prepared in your strategic plan. You need to be prepared with people and a process. You got to know how you're doing, how you plan to get there. And that's where your experts that you have up close. I was not an economic development person. I didn't know the details of how to do that, but I hired somebody who did. And as we move forward, all of our departments moved together because there were experts in that arena. My expertise wound up being the last thing I thought, and that was to bring in the resources that they needed to do what we agreed we should do. Next slide, please. So we're ready, we're set. You got a plan, you know where you're going, you're legal, you have your staff. Next slide. Something you have to remember, because a CDC is called a nonprofit, we often think that you can just live from grant to grant. And that's not true. I think a better name for it should be a public benefit corporation. A nonprofit doesn't mean you don't make profit. That is a tax identification status. CDC nonprofit means that the profit you make goes back into your purpose. Whatever it is you incorporated with the state, your bylaws, this money is going for housing, or this money is going for childcare, or this money is going, whatever it is, it's a public benefit. That's why they get to take it off their taxes. You don't take the profit and give it to the shareholders or to the board members, but you reinvest it in this community. And that's why it's a community development corporation. It is for the public benefit, but everybody needs to get paid. And very often, like in any other business, the better you pay, the more attractive the work is where you are. So one of the things you might want to do is not bring in the skeleton crew on a skeleton salary, so that if you talk to people with nonprofits, they often tell you by the time they get somebody really trained, they leave and go somewhere else and make more money. The reason, what I've watched people do in that case is try to shame them into staying. Um, that's not motivation. Shame is not motivation. Who should be ashamed is those of us who are paying the people to do the work. Why should it cost? Why should we pay less when we believe that what we're doing is a greater work? We're doing this in the name of Jesus. We are transforming the mind through Jesus Christ, through the word, actually living it out, and living it out not as a spectator. We're not doing stuff for you. I live 5 blocks, well, I did, I live 5 blocks from Crenshaw. So when the vision was to redo where we are and not make Crenshaw a quick way to get to the airport off of the 10 freeway, but a destination place, then what we had to do was then look at, as partners, this is my neighborhood. What do I need to do? What would Christ have us do here to make this place a better place for everybody? Whole ship rise. Sometimes we get mad and talk about gentrification because we're saying if we make it really nice, we'll push all the poor people out. That's only if we don't help the poor people from being poor. Help them with schooling, help them with the things that they want to do. So these are what the nuts and bolts that you have to have. Understanding that it's a public benefit corporation. You set up those systems that we spoke about. You got legal counsel that we talked about. Keeping accurate books. Can't say it enough. That's often the place where nonprofits get in trouble because they have a good heart and they weren't trying to steal anything. That won't keep you out of jail. 8, please. A company staff, it says could be, but I've grown to believe that it is its most valuable asset. But it's important that you learn how to staff because it can be the most costly liability if not. And I think that speaks for itself. Make sure that you make where you are, what people do when you hire them, it's what they want to do and where they want to be. It's not a space taker, it's not a comma of what they want to do and where they want to be. And then you make it profitable for them to be there and do it. You don't have to coerce anybody, just like you came into, the Lord will send people to you. He did me, and I know I'm not different and peculiar to that. He sent people that knew much more than I knew about their particular areas. I knew people and I knew how to raise money and I learned how to raise money to make it work. Next slide, please. We talked about the felt needs concept, finding out what people want. One of the ways you do that, and we did it with high school seniors, is give them a community project of looking at their assets. The government looks to see what you need. They always go in, what is this community lacking? They lack housing, they lack a good school, whatever. We do just the opposite. We do, instead of a needs assessment, an asset assessment. So on Crenshaw, we found out we had the remnants of the Japanese migration after they had been interred in the United States during the war. So the Japanese Credit Union, the Japanese Gardeners Association, the Japanese Dental Association, the Japanese Theater, all were right there at Jefferson and Crenshaw. And we found we had 2 libraries, we had University of Southern California, we had more assets than we had needs, but we hadn't ever looked at it that way. So once we began to identify the assets, how do we grow the assets? How do we make the people who are in this community grow together? There was a great movement from Louisiana to that area. So there are a lot of people who were culturally Creole and the Japanese people living together the first time in the United States. That those of you who know about Dorsey High School, it's the only high school in the country that was ever 50-50 Japanese and second and third generation Japanese and African American, second and third generation from the South, growing together. Well, that was a whole nother way to look at the programs, what we need. We can look and say, this is what we have. And we did that. And now the community is exploding. You maintain your programs by having great staff, you retrain people as you go, and you attract resources by doing something that everybody wants. You can't go sell your need. And if you do, it isn't sustainable. You sell your assets. This is a place that you can get to the airport in 20 minutes without getting on a freeway. You can get to downtown Los Angeles without getting on the freeway in 20 minutes. We get an ocean breeze every day by 3 o'clock, so we never have smog. Those are assets. But when you hear Cruising on the Shaw on the radio, you didn't hear about those assets. You didn't hear that 70% of the homes in the immediate area are single family and, owned by the people who live in them. Those are reasons to be there. And as we grew and as the community educated itself about its own assets, who we are, and began the circle that I started at the beginning, see themselves as Christ sees them. This is not a place to try to get out of, but a place to elevate together.
We were first-time buyers, and it was just a very aggressive market. So whenever we thought we had a good offer, someone seemed to have more stability or a house that they could sell, which always seemed to put us out of the running. We received information about different programs in Los Angeles County that we could apply for, homeowners assistance, down payment programs.
All of which we learned in the program. It truly is, a dream come true for this to be our first house.
Well, occasionally the people say, where you live? And I attempt to tell them 60th and Crenshaw, and they say, oh, you live in that beautiful building. And I always get those kind of remarks. Oh, you live in that new, beautiful building. That sure is a beautiful building. And I have to agree, yes, it is, inside as well as outside. And I'm comfortable here and I love it. And hopefully I'll go to heaven right from here.
West Angeles Homes is a multi-family residential unit of 44 apartments. They feature 2 and 3 bedroom apartments and includes a computer center, a after-school program, and recreation facilities for the children.
So what I wanted to make sure we have time for questions as well. I wanted you to see Elder Hicks because he was one of our first residents in that housing development, and he was such a delight, and he did go to heaven right from there. He was 91 when he passed. And those 3 testimonies, I wanted you to see from the inside of the people who are actually receiving the assistance that our CDC brings. The last video is only a couple of minutes long. I want you to see from the words of the people, and that's the way I also wrote the book. Instead of it being a memoir, the people who run the programs are interviewed and tell you how they did it. And I want what I'm sharing today to be something you can use for yourself, how to actually do it, the things you think about before you jump out and get a grant. I've seen a lot of people feel that, well, I know somebody, I can go to my council person, or I know the senator. And you get resources, but you don't have the right foundation. And as we know from the word, it turns to sand. So stage 1 is developing a CDC, and that's where I want to end today. I hope that I've been able to share something that will benefit you practically on taking those next steps of doing a Christian Community Development Corporation.